what are we going to learn today in part 2? How a semantic treehouse is used. So that relates to what you guys were expecting. That's good news. We just had welcome and introductions. Now we will dive into what is the problem. The lack of data interoperability. Then we will look into some design principles of the semantic treehouse. We'll have a short break around 10:30, and then afterwards we'll have a demonstration with some user experiences in the semantic treehouse and a short conclusion. We should be finished by 12. Yesterday that managed nicely on time, so I'm sure we'll do the same today. So I will now shut up and I will give the floor to Wouter and to Linda.
So welcome today on the second day of the workshop. Yesterday we took a real deep dive, or at least from a technology perspective, we went really deep into the deployment of the semantic treehouse. This was very much catered to the technical audience, and now we are going to put the developers and the DevOps back into the basement, and we go into the light. And look at it at the tool, the semantic treehouse platform, from a user perspective. So we just assume that the platform is working and deployed fine, and we'll see actually what the use of the platform is. I will be talking at first for some time. This was the agenda, but actually yesterday's session inspired me a little bit. So I'm afraid I made a mess of the agenda, because now the agenda looks like this. Don't be afraid. We still will have breaks, but I would like to have more demo in between. So we'll have a quick, brief introduction of what TNO's role is, because that's important background information to make sense of how Semantic Treehouse was developed in-house. And then one thing we forgot to mention yesterday, how you can contribute to the development of the platform. Then a part about what is it that we are trying to solve, actually. So what does semantic interoperability, semantic standards mean? And then this will take, I think, maybe 15 minutes in total. And then I'll go to the first demo, which is just showing you around on the platform. Then I'll talk some more about the importance of community, because I will show the content, but the other half of this, or the other ingredient for successful interoperability, is community, people. This content community combination will be a recurring theme this morning. And some background info on the Dutch approach of achieving interoperability in a sector or in a business community. And then we'll move to Linda with her demonstration of, I think, maybe one of the most successful communities in the Netherlands that we have worked with, and also most intense and successful use of the platform. So that's why we chose SETU, which is a different community, not in the agricultural domain, but in the flexible staffing domain. But you'll be fine. This we won't go into the details that much about the particulars of that sector. But that community and that the use of the platform is very nice example, I think, of how it comes to life. And then we'll start to at the end we'll see where the questions are from you as the audience. We could discuss some alternative uses, alternative to the SETU way of using, and we can just see what kind of aspects of the platform I can demonstrate based on your questions. Okay, so we'll have some breaks in between. I don't know exactly where. It depends on how fast or slow we're going with each section. But I will have to tell a few things first before I will show the platform for the first time. Okay. The role of TNO, it's important to reiterate that we are an independent research and technology organization in the Netherlands. So we don't usually make that much software. Our mission is to connect people and knowledge to create innovations, mostly focused on the Dutch scope, but also European-wide, of course. And we do this by doing applied research as much as possible with public-private partnerships. Okay, So we are a not-profit organization with around 4,500 staff. And we are divided in a lot of units. So that might be a large number of people, but we have a lot of different themes and topics that we work on. And Linda and I are from the unit on innovation in ICT. So the unit ISP. This is where we're from. And what's interesting to note here is that most of our work in this unit is done in different sectors, right? So we do commit to certain sectors, for example, health or logistics, but we are doing challenges in a sector independent way. So we are solving interoperability or data sharing, for example, and AI, and we try to apply this in different sectors and then distill the lessons that are generic, so to speak, so to disseminate the knowledge among other sectors for maximum impact. Okay. So Linda works at the data science department. I work at the data ecosystems department. It's not really important distinction at this point. What's important is that we work in a wide range of sectors, agricultural as well. And yesterday we had two colleagues working in Groningen. And I am based in the middle here in Soesterberg near Utrecht, and so is Linda. Here's another picture of the unit that we work on. Basically, our motto is all major societal innovation challenges require some form of data sharing. Okay, and I think this includes the scope of zero waste. Right. So on to the next thing. One thing we forgot yesterday. Of course, we forgot to mention that if you have a problem, now that some of you have deployed Semantic Treehouse for yourself, or how to, if you run into any issues or you have any new feature requests, of course, please contribute and consider creating an issue. You know where to find us at gitlab.com/semantic-treehouse, and you have two repositories. So if something went wrong with the deployment, you can maybe make an issue in the setup demo repository. But if it's more about the functionality of the platform, in particular after this session, then go ahead and look at the issues. You can see we have migrated not just the code base, but our complete issue management to the public repository. So you can see that we've closed almost 1,000 issues over the years. And there's a few open as well, 200, of course, with different priorities. So please, if you have an idea or a bug, first have a look if there's an open issue for that already using the search bar. But if it's not, just feel free to create a new one. You'll be led to the template here. Anyone who's worked with GitLab or GitHub on software collaboration knows what this is like. But if you have a feature request, you can use the feature request template, or a bug report, you can use the bug report template. We very much like for you to contribute this way if you find anything or have an obstacle some way. Okay, so that was something that we forgot to mention yesterday, but it's important. All right. Then, when we can start in earnest, let's talk about the purpose of the platform. It's funny that I just showed you our GitLab environment, because Semantic Treehouse as a platform is not so different from GitLab itself, or GitHub for that matter, because with GitHub you have an online community platform for software developers to collaboratively work on software, and just like that, for Semantic Treehouse is a community platform, but for a wider range of people, business and IT professionals, to work collaboratively, well, maybe on software, but in particular a specific kind, which is data models, common data models. So the whole idea of GitLab or GitHub or even Swagger Hub, these platforms, this applies to what Semantic Treehouse is as well. And that's important for two reasons. Because maybe yesterday you saw, after some of us successfully deployed Semantic Treehouse, it was empty. Nothing was there. And that's typical for platforms, right? For platforms, you need a community of people on the platform, and you need content. And if you deploy semantic treehouse, you at first have neither, of course. So that's why it's not, the question arises, now what? So I want to talk about the community and the content of the Semantic Treehouse platform, and start by what is the content about? What are semantic standards? Okay. So if Semantic Treehouse is the solution, then what is the problem? We like to say that Semantic Treehouse can be used to establish semantic interoperability in practice in data sharing communities. Many of you might be involved with a data sharing community, so to say, in the agricultural domain. Often they are geographically scoped, right? So maybe Slovenian or East Slovenian community, and it's and this word semantic interoperability is important because data exchange, successful data or information exchange requires semantic interoperability, that the meaning assigned to the data from the sender is aligned with the meaning interpreted by the receiver end, right? So semantic interoperability requires that you have some kind of semantic agreement between users. And when I say users, I mean, a professional setting. So maybe organizations. And this semantic agreement is captured in a semantic standard, or we can also say a common data model. So we say, well, the data should look something like this. It's a model. And if we adhere to that model, then we know what to expect and we can work with that, and we can do machine-to-machine interoperability. We don't need a human in the loop to look and interpret the data. We can just work with the data as it is exchanged, right? So that's what it's all about. So Semantic Treehouse is for creating, maintaining, but also boosting the adoption of these common data models. That's what the platform is about. So that's a lot of talk. Let's just have a look at what that looks like, okay? And like I said, I did give you a warning. We will use a completely different Semantic Treehouse deployment in a different sector today as an illustration, which is from the SETU, which is an acronym used in the Dutch flexible staffing industry. So let's have a look at the setu.semantictreehouse.nl. That's what the environment is, where it's hosted. So now there you go. We have arrived at the SETU environment. And immediately you see words like a staffing order, a human resource assignment. And that makes sense because we are now in a community of flexible staffing agencies who decided, maybe Linda will tell more about that, who decided years ago that they need their data to be interoperable, also with their clients, their staffing customers. And when you go to specifications here, you see the common data models that they have agreed on. In fact, there's a whole list of different ones. We can collapse. And my apologies, you'll see some Dutch because it's a Dutch community. But you can see that there's different groups of specifications. And the main one is the upper one. It's the purchase to pay data models. So these are all data models used in the purchase to pay processes of flexible staffing organizations, right? And I will take a very, well, maybe not very inspirational example, but very easy to understand. I'll just take the invoice, because even an electric invoice is not trivial to standardize and to make sure that when an invoice is sent, it is received automatically and processed automatically. You would think that invoices are all alike, but they are not. So they also required semantic agreement first. And this was captured in the semantic data model of the invoice, okay? Now, I have clicked on this specification, and now you see that it actually has many old versions. And this is what I would like to show you at this point. I would like to show you how we did the things in the old days, so to speak. What is a semantic standard? What was a semantic standard 10 years ago? So this was a semantic standard 10 years ago. This is how we captured 10 years ago semantic agreement on what an invoice message looked like in the flexible staffing industry. Note it's a 130-page document. And note, by the way, a familiar name. So we've been at it for quite a while. And here's a table of contents, which is important to show you what a semantic standard is, right? It has an introduction, it has a scoping. It's about, this is an invoice process that we are trying to make interoperable. So that's what its purpose is of this common data model. Then there's this business overview with some information of, well, what kind of roles are there? Because there's the staffing customer, the staffing supplier, but sometimes there's a third role, which is more like the handler of transactions, so that might be like a third party. This is all context that informs the design of the common information model. And so these two things, 3 and 4, I would like for you to understand when it comes to the question, what is a semantic standard? Because usually you have 2 layers. You have the information. What kind of information? And what does that look like from a technical perspective? That's chapter 4. So this is abstract. Here you see an abstract diagram of what they agreed on, what is the content, the informational content of the SETU invoice. You can see all kinds of things that have to do with paying invoices, right? Tax amount, different invoice lines. And then what follows is all these information elements and their descriptions, what they mean. And including how cardinality, for people unfamiliar, this is how often this in a message can occur. So maybe attachments can be 0, so they won't have, this message can have no attachments, or at maximum 1. So that's how you can read this. Some have, n, which is, a lot of different occurrences of this information block. Okay, so this is the design, the overall design of the common data model, and then chapter 4 gives guidelines on, well, what does it look like when we implement it in our systems? So the technical mapping. And now you see things like XML or JSON, that sort of thing. So the syntax binding is here. The information model is translated to the actual technical syntax. So now you have, well, here is the root element of invoice. It has these objects, and it looks like this. There's XML examples of how it can look like, what it can look like. And what's interesting and a recurring theme also when you are trying to agree on common semantics is that usually you will reuse some other standard, right? Invoicing is not unique for flexible staffing. So a very natural reaction is to look around and look for, well, how are other sectors or other countries even dealing with standard invoice, and can we build on that? And that's exactly what they did here. So they used a bigger standard and they said, well, we're cutting out this part because we're not maybe in some other sector they're using that, but we're not using that here. And at the end, so take a look at how long this table is. This is a table that specifies every element in their common data model. And in this case, this is just an invoice. And this goes on for 100 pages or something like that. And then at the end, they will give examples. So what does the SETU flexible staffing invoice look like in practice when we implement it? So this would be a technical invoice message that would be interpretable, machine interpretable by the receiver, because it adheres to the common agreed data model, right? So there's all these information elements, and anyone familiar with XML will recognize the syntax here. Okay, so this is how we did it in 10 years ago. Does this make sense until now? What the problem is that we're trying to solve, right? So the invoice is almost, it's maybe a trivial, it's maybe example in the sense that we all know how an invoice looks like, but you can have you can have different use cases that are more unique to your sector. And
I understand that the goal is how to agree on this example, how to that all parties agree on this example. That what is how the example looks like, what is the syntax and so on. This is
exactly.
The goal of,
And what are the optional elements? What are the mandatory elements? What we can expect in the fields? What kind of range in the and what do they mean, right? So what are the bounds of the meaning of every element, so that we know the edge cases as well. But this was how we did 10 years ago. And you can see there have been, and this was before we had Semantic Treehouse. So Semantic Treehouse, we built our first version in 2015 or 16 or so. And we actually started using it for the common data, collaborative data, common data modeling, so to speak, after that. And now recently, or more recently, I should say, the newest version is completely integrated with Semantic Treehouse, or provided through the platform. This was what I just showed was just a PDF. And now I will show you how we disseminate this information using Semantic Treehouse. So now you see that we don't need 100 pages of table. We have this tree. It's the same, roughly, because some content-wise, some changes have been made, of course, over the years, but it's the same tree. And you can see that we can go back to different versions. And we can even use this marker here to expand all. You see, it's no surprise that the original document was 300 pages long, because there's quite a lot of possible information elements here. And what we also see is that there are some interesting tags here. And in particular, this one, that of a person, this is symbolizes that watch out, this is a personal, this might be personal data in the scope of GDPR, right? So that's one of the flags that we've used here. I don't want to go into the content here too much, but if we scroll down further, we'll see another interesting symbol here. And when you click on that, then we see that every element, when you click on it, has more information. You have a definition, you have some usage notes that might clarify anything unclear about how to use this element, what can go in, what kind of information can go in, what kind of information cannot. But the reason that this symbol of speech here is there is because someone created an issue about this element. Someone had a question or wanted to see this element changed. And this is where it's, again, the platform Semantic Treehouse looks a little bit like GitLab or GitHub, right? Because we have an issue management component here. But we have it integrated with the way the common data model is presented. So we have here someone from the flexible staffing industry asking in Dutch, so you can't really read along. Well, how do I use this? And so on. So remember that I said Semantic Treehouse is a platform about the content, the common data models, but also about the community. This is a first example of how we marry the content with the community, right? The community can interact with the content here. And this is important because it's at the end of the day, it's just semantic agreements, right? So you can have contents that nobody looks at, but you need this to be adopted by the prospective users. And for that, they need to give feedback and be able to ask questions about it. So we can have a closer look at what issues there are in the whole environment. So that's not just from this specification, but from the whole environment. All these specifications, if there are any issues, open issues, they are listed here. So we are now in the second page of the platform. And this is good for not the end users per se, although this might be useful, but for the second type of Semantic Treehouse user, the maintainer, right? So the maintainer is responsible for it's maybe a bit like a project leader. It's really the maintainer, he or she is responsible for making sure that these standards are adopted, making sure that feedback is accepted, and that the collaborative development of the common data models goes on as time goes on. And so this view of the issues is nice because if you take the upper one and you click, then you can see more about who made the issue, when, what the issue is about, but crucially, also a link to the element that it's about. So we don't have to remember which page in the 150 document this is about. We just click to the context that this is about. This is important. This is an important feature to us because it helps also because these processes can be years, right? Years long. So it helps to remember. It's like a knowledge base. It helps to remember what this was about. So if I click on here, then it should open the particular element in what the issue was about. It does not. So I need to make a bug report today. But if I know where to find it, it was here. This was the one. So it should open like this. I think this concludes the first demo. We have a lot to show still, but I guess you have seen if there is a core, if there's the basics of Semantic Treehouse, I think it's this. We have the content here that we want to all involved to agree on, and we have the interaction with the community through issues. That's again, I think the core. And I will show you later also a very important tool to help the community actually implement the model, and that is the validator. But that's for later. All right. Demo 1 was the content. I think we have some more gas in the tank to continue, don't you think, Lisa? So I will want to now switch gears and look at the community part. The community is really the other half of this the other requirement of what I wanted to say the other requirement for successful application of Semantic Treehouse. Remember, it's just a platform, it's a tool. The added value really comes when you put content in there and you have a community that's invested in that content. So, like I said, as TNO, we have been involved in different sectors for over the years and all these sectors, or many of them over the years, have tried to make a step towards more digitalization. The digitalization agenda of Dutch sectors is usually ambitious. And here you see all kinds of symbols designating different sectors in the Netherlands. And you can see, or you should see, my apologies, Linda, we removed SETU. Oh, wait, we have ABU here. Here's the ABU, of course. This is the flexible staffing sector. You have also agricultural sectors. Now, the degree of collaboration between TNO and these sectors, it varies. We have a very tight collaboration with the ABU. And in some cases, we only have a nodding acquaintance, so to speak. The reason that I'm pointing to this is because our work is with the standard development organizations that arise within those sectors, right? So these sectors make a common agenda for digitalization. And usually what you see is that they create some kind of foundation within their sector, some kind of organization to make sure that the technical side is taken care of when it comes to successful data sharing. So we have the ABU, which is the flexible staffing. They created the SETU with us, which is a standard we call a standard development organization. Now, make no mistake, standard development organizations, or SDO, the term is usually reserved for the big international organizations like ISO, right? Or CENELEC. I'm not talking about those kinds of standard development organizations. I'm talking about locally scoped, sector-specific collaboration forms, like the SETU. And as TNO, like I said, we are a research and technology organization. We work on different sectors, and we saw that these different sectors had common challenges. How do you publish these common data models effectively? I just showed you. You can publish a 130-page document. Sure, maybe there's different ways. How do we facilitate validation of correct implementations? How do we organize work groups and keep people in the work groups? And how do you approach that certification? How do you make sure that you reuse as much other data models as possible and don't reinvent the wheel? What does good governance look like? All these challenges were common, regardless of the sector, right? So this is sort of the history of the birth of Semantic Treehouse, because common challenges required a common solution. And in our work in a few of these sectors, we developed this software, this platform, at first to make our own efforts more effective. We didn't want to write 130-page documents, but Linda will show you more about what it was like for us in the early years for SETU. One side note. I think until now, yesterday and this morning, we haven't mentioned the word data space that much. I will keep it brief. Tomorrow we will go more into data spaces, but data spaces basically face similar challenges when it comes to interoperability. It's a bit complicated because you can't really assume that within a data space there's a single community with parties that are familiar with each other. So it's a different story a little bit, but in general, the same topics apply. And that's why we are also developing Semantic Treehouse to be completely compatible with data spaces. And then in that context of data space, you'll often hear Semantic Treehouse mentioned as a vocabulary hub, because in data spaces frameworks, that's the component that takes the role of storing common data models and providing that service. Okay. Okay, so I hope I made clear that from where we came from with Semantic Treehouse, the role of the community is essential. I know we've deployed yesterday the platform, and I'm about to show you more about how to use it. But if it's not within the context of a community that's invested in the content, then the platform does not add much value. And I would like to go on to 7, the Dutch approach. Again, I am bordering on the topic of tomorrow, but we need to discuss the thinking behind the tool, because not just TNO, but also others in this circle recognized that the challenges were common, and any experience that they made, that they gained in organizing this, we combined that into the best practices for organizing semantic agreement. And B.O.M.O.S is a Dutch acronym. So in Dutch, it's Beheer en Ontwikkelmodel voor Open Standaarden, B.O.M.O.S. And literally, if you translate that, it would be something like Governance and Development Model for Open Standards. This is the backbone, so to speak, the conceptual backbone. This is what our approach is. This is how we think about semantic agreements in communities. And you can read about this. B.O.M.O.S for a long time was a Dutch document. And in the last month or so, the maintainer of the documents have published the English version. So I strongly recommend, if this tool and these problems of semantic interoperability, data sharing is of any interest for you professionally, then please have a look at this document, because this is describes our lessons learned in the Netherlands, and also the thinking behind the Semantic Treehouse as a tool. And very briefly, what you will find is a set of best practices for organization of standardization. So how to create this community, how to organize, what are the roles and what are the responsibilities. The philosophy is based on openness and collaboration. You could very well do something completely different, right? You can just have a big market player who has their data model and they'll just force their format on others. And that works from a semantic interoperability perspective. That works fine. Others have no choice but to adhere to that model, to do that way of data sharing. But this B.O.M.O.S and our approach and Semantic Treehouse is based on open standardization, open standards, and collaboration. And in our experience, that is the most effective way to achieve long-term effect. Because people try in earnest, they have an incentive, and if something changes, we can come together, maybe a new regulation, we can come together and analyze together what the common data model should look like in the next version, right? So that's why we say working on common data models in B.O.M.O.S is by the users for the users. It's collaborative. And you can use these documents in different ways. And this is where my lack of knowledge about what your context looks like and where you are at. So maybe we can discuss it today, or if not today, tomorrow a little bit. But you can use B.O.M.O.S in different ways, these documents. You can, if you are at the start of a new initiative, you can use it as a guideline to set up an organization. You can use it as a background for more inspiration. Or even if you're already on a running train, so to speak, you can use it as a benchmark. You can check a benchmark of some sort. You can check, well, we have this community also. What maybe we have a nice lesson. Maybe have something nice to find in B.O.M.O.S as inspiration for our current work. So what is B.O.M.O.S about exactly? Basically, it distinguishes between a few set of activities. Now, remember, a recurring theme is that semantic agreement is as much an organizational challenge as it is a technical challenge. And you can really see it here because it needs for a community to come together and agree on a vision, to agree on how to finance the collaboration and how to govern who has a say, which roles there are. This is the top and usually the start for. And I see, and I was telling you about the basic structure of B.O.M.O.S is a bunch of activities, many of them so organizational, as you can see in the strategy. And when you have an organization, you have some sort of, well, let me scope to today's session, because today's session is not about strategy and tactics, about how to strategy and tactics for data interoperability. It's about more the operation, right? So say that you have this community, say that it's clear that there are people invested in creating common data models, then Semantic Treehouse can be used for the core, which is the operations. And with operation, we mean co-development of the specification. So that's why you see that there's an activity called initialization. Maybe from the community there are coming signals that we need, there's a new need for a new standard or a new process that needs to be interoperable. Or you can have maintenance requests or issues, change requests for existing common data models. In any case, you will need to start drafting, creating possible solutions while continuously discussing what the requirements are with the end users in mind, right? With the end users themselves, in fact. And then you can imagine that when these requirements become clear, you can implement changes in the new version, and then you arrive at documentation. And finally, if you remember the previous screen of the SETU invoice, you have a new version at the top, right? So this operation of collaboratively maintaining the standards in the environment is the basic operations of a standard development organization, and this is very much in scope for Semantic Treehouse. The other part are both support. So communication, I would say, of course, we have the publication I just showed you. And there are maybe other channels that are more convenient for these two activities. But in particular, implementation support. Do not underestimate implementation support. You might have the perfect common data model. You know that maybe in East Slovenia, for all the food loss use case participants or stakeholders, you know that this data model is fit for purpose. You know that if others would just adopt this, then it would be all interoperable. But in practice, people need help. Even if that's true, people need help with implementing this because it's a change. So implementation support is to boost adoption of your agreements. And Semantic Treehouse in particular has validation service. I will show you that briefly in a few moments. But there's also other activities such as help desk activities that you can organize there. But you can see also things that are out of scope of the platform. For example, organizing trainings or even pilot projects to help get the first implementers ready. All these things are activities in the B.O.M.O.S framework of how to really get interoperability in your data sharing in community. Okay, so tomorrow we'll be looking at the more strategic and tactical part. I think these are also very important and even a prerequisite. In fact, that is my summary of B.O.M.O.S. So it's a set of best practices. It's based on openness and collaboration, and we know from experience it's the most effective way of boosting and achieving adoption of these common data models. And if you remember a few things, then I hope that it is this. In our experience, standardization and interoperability are business challenges first and technical challenges second. So there's a tension there with this statement and our workshops, because we have spent yesterday deploying a technical solution, but make no mistake, it's a business challenge first, or at least it's requires mobilization and organization of stakeholders to get successful and lasting improvements in interoperability. We have years of experience doing that latter as well. So our experience is both on the business side and the technical side. And Semantic Treehouse, in short, is a platform where members of that community are facilitated to carry mostly the technical challenges to carry out these activities. Okay, so I think at this point we are here, ready for the demo for Linda. Yeah, before I give the floor to Linda, she will do the demo to Semantic Treehouse for maintainers with SETU, of course, the flexible staffing context. I would like to point out that when we say maintainer, we mean this user. There's two users on the platform in general, just like with GitHub or GitLab, for example. You have the users interested in what's on the platform and perhaps contributing, and you have the maintainers who are sort of owners of what's on the platform. And these maintainers, they are in charge of these three activity groups, right? As owners, or for lack of better words, they are overseeing these operations. And with that little bit of context, we can skip that. With that little bit of context, I would like now to give the floor to Linda.
Yes, thank you, Wouter. I think I'm now sharing my screen, so you can all see it. All right. So I will give you mainly a demo of the SETU environment of Semantic Treehouse, but I wanted to give you a quick introduction and say a bit more than Wouter already did about what the SETU is, and also the standardization process behind the SETU organization. So in very short, the use case that I will be presenting to you is all about semantic standards in the flexible staffing industry, mainly focused on the Netherlands. And the standards, the human resource standards that the SETU as a foundation is developing, enables employment agencies, hirers, and HR software suppliers to solve their digital integration challenges. And we strive to do that in a modern, flexible, and cost-efficient way. So I think it's already more than 15 years ago that these organizations together in the Netherlands said that the integration challenges, the data sharing challenges that they have, that it's not something that they can solve on their own, but they need to collaborate on this. And more importantly, they said that it's not something that they want to compete upon. So they shook hands and said that this is something that they want to pick up collaboratively. And that's where also the SETU as a foundation was started as an agreement between a lot of these major players in the field of flexible staffing in the Netherlands. So what is it then about? It's mainly about the data exchange between employment agencies and the hirers or their customers. And of course, the process that we are supporting here is the hiring of flex workers. And the employment agency in this case is doing mediation and assignment of these flex workers. Moreover, if when that happens, afterwards there will be some kind of registration and payment of the flex workers, and there's also some processing involved on the side of the employment agency to make this happen. So there are a lot of administrative processes behind this, and also on both sides, back office systems, IT systems that are involved in these processes. And the SETU started with developing standards for the exchange between these back office systems. So it's really a behind the scenes challenge, so to say, but very related to the business processes. So if we look at something that Wouter already showed, which was the invoice, it's really at the end of this process when the flex worker has worked at the customer, that there will be some invoice flowing from the employment agency to the customer to make sure that that there's being paid for the flex worker. There are also, for example, time cards being standardized by the SETU, in which is stated that the number of hours a flex worker has been working at a specific job in order to be able to also make up this invoice. Then there are a lot of other standards as well. So, for example, the initial request for a flex worker that is coming from the customer towards the employment agency. Then the employment agency will do an offer, will state which human resource or which flex worker is actually available for this job. Well, then they'll come to some kind of agreement. And when we're talking about people ordering, seems to be a bit odd, but it's actually what it is. So an agreement will be made on which flex worker is going to work on which job. And the assignment, which is also here in this picture, is more or less the final agreement on when this will happen and under what conditions. So this is a bit of the context. There are also some other standards, again, more to the front of this process. For example, stating vacancies more in general, and also offering CVs of certain flex workers before actually making a specific request for a flex worker. And the case that I want to elaborate a bit more on today is that I think it's now 1.5 or 2 years ago, in the working groups that we have with this community, it was stated that actually around the process of planning, so after we have agreed that someone's going to work, there will be a weekly planning on who will work at what location, for example. that there was still a lot of manual labor or a lot of typing from one form to another in the process of planning of the actual flex workers. So I will present you the case of the development of this new standard in the set of standards that was already there. Looking at this process of defining such a standard, there we can see more or less 5 steps in this process. So first of all, we gather a working group, which will consist of multiple representatives of the different organizations. So that can be people working at employment agencies, can also be people working at more IT companies offering these back office systems, for example. So we always, as Wouter already emphasized, also for Semantic Treehouse, but also in this process, we look for a combination of more technically oriented people that know how these systems work, but we also definitely look for people that know about the business processes. Because they formulate the actual information request that's around this process. So once we have this working group together from all different organizations, first thing is, of course, to define the scope of these of the standard that we want to develop. Because this can be very broad, there can maybe be multiple scenarios which we want to or maybe do not want to support with the standard. So it's very important to define the scope of the standard, that it's not too broad, because then we probably need a lot of elements and some organizations might not use them and other will use them. So we want to have a quite specific scope for a specific standard. And once we have defined this, then we can gather, of course, input for the standard. So we will come together with the working group and talk about the specific elements, as Wouter also already showed a bit, that we need for the data exchange for this specific standard. Then the actual development of the standard is already a bit taking place, but with the 4th step here, I mean the actual work that the standards development organization is doing behind the scenes, processing all the inputs and coming up with the nice result that we already have seen some examples of. And in the end, we will, of course, publish the standards. And as we always strive for open standards, this will then be available for a lot of people. And then this seems like a very organized and good process. But if you look from the perspective of the maintainer, it can be and has been quite chaotic sometimes. And I just see that this is there's some Dutch on this slide. But if we want to maintain these standards in a collaborative manner, then quite a lot is actually involved. And Wouter already showed the B.O.M.O.S picture, which of course says something about all the processes that you need to have in place. But if you really look into the more operational side of this, of the development of the standards, there are also a lot of artifacts involved. And I will now show you how we did this before Semantic Treehouse, because this illustrates, I think, very well why we, from TNO side, started developing Semantic Treehouse. As Wouter already showed, before we had Semantic Treehouse, we had these very extensive documents where the actual standard was being defined. So these were PDF documents of 100+ pages, which was, of course, the end result of the standardization effort. But while doing this and coming up with this standard, we actually had a lot of requests, which are called here MR, which stands for maintenance requests. You can also call it a change request, where people stated like, I need this specific element for this specific process into this standard. Otherwise, for my system that I'm working with, or for my specific interpretation of the process, the standard is otherwise not usable. So we gather a lot of these maintenance requests or change requests from the community, which at this point in time, so we're talking about 8 to 10 years ago, These were folders on a file share somewhere where we gathered all these maintenance requests, and where we also said like, okay, this is how are we going to process this request. Then, of course, we had Excel lists of working groups with who is participating in which group for specific standards to be developed, what are the contact details, if we need to contact them. There were the technical artifacts, and we had a development platform where we developed the actual technical standard, which also generated these nice pictures of the overview of the standards, in this case, for example, an XML editor. We had the example messages, which also Wouter showed already a bit in Semantic Treehouse, which a lot of people actually grab to make sense of what the standard is about. Then we also had code lists. I will show you in a minute that we also have those in Semantic Treehouse right now. But this was a bit apart from the large 120-page document. We have the code list separate from that to be able to change them more often than we change the standard. So these again were separate files that were stored somewhere. Then we also had a portal, an online portal already for that time, where people could actually submit these maintenance requests that I just showed. So people could just fill in whatever request they had, then we process them, then we put them in a folder that I just showed on how to process this. And then, of course, we also got emails about all these standards with questions about how it worked, how it should be interpreted. And I don't know about you, but this was more or less the feeling that we sometimes got from all these artifacts that we had, all these documents, all these folders, all these communication channels. And we thought at one moment in time that it's for a maintainer of a standard, someone working at the standardization development organization, is not really doable to keep track of everything. And that's why the idea for Semantic Treehouse started. An integrated solution for the management of data models and the development of standards driven by the community. As Wouter already emphasized, this community part is really important for us. It's not only something to publish, but it's also something that we want to enable these interactions with the community. So all these artifacts that I just showed, we tried to combine them into one online platform, and that has been the basis for Semantic Treehouse. And just there will be a bit maybe repeated of what Wouter already showed, but we think it's good to dive again into the platform itself. So I will put it on the screen here to show you everything that we just saw also within the platform. So Wouter already showed this a bit. I'm now not yet logged in, but as it's an open standard, you can look at all the specifications that we have. So these were all that Wouter already showed, and as I said, I want to show today a bit more about the planning standards that we have been developing. So here you say under this header that we actually specified with this working group that we have 3 specific messages. So there's a planning constraints message, there's a planning requests message, and there's a planning assignment message here. So if you click on this, this is familiar already from what Wouter showed. We currently are developing a second version of this message model, which can be seen here, and there is a first version that is being published in 2023. So I will dive into this one just to show you how it looks like. So this is the equivalent to the PDF file that we showed. but then a bit more, it's more easy to browse through this than through the PDF document. For example, if you're looking for a specific element, you could say like, okay, I want to know something about the supplier, the staffing supplier. Then we have a filtering here just to scan whatever it's in there. What Wouter did not yet show is that if you click on this, you will get all the specifics for all the elements that are defined in this standard. So, for example, if you want to know more about this element of the supplier, so the supplier of the the flex worker, then for each element, the platform shows what is the definition. This is it's a very simple definition, but it also shows that we have relied in this, and I will get back to that in a minute, that we have relied on a already existing standards, as you see here. So this, we have called it supplier, and it's based on, and it's maybe a bit small, but we have based ourselves on the HR Open standards, and there they define something like a party. And we have said that the supplier of the flex worker is actually a party as defined by the HR Open standard. So in this case, what was already mentioned, like introducing a 15th standard on top of a 14th standard, we actually try to reuse definitions that are already out there made by others. And this HR Open is actually an international standardization organization for human resourcing processes. So these are the basics of the platform. So sometimes there are a lot more sub-elements here. And for example, here you also see that apart from the definition and the type, there's also a so-called business rule. And it says that in the position profile, so this is the element that we are currently looking into, there should at least be a position ID or a position task, and that thing should have an ID. As this is a business rule which is very difficult in some implementation formats to define, we have defined it here and also in a more natural language manner. So these are the types of things that we also want to define, because only then we know, for example, in this case, the identification of this element. And if it's both not filled, then we do not have any identification, and that would be less desirable. And Wouter already hinted on that, is that we also have a validator in the platform where we can also check against all these business rules that are being defined in the platform. So you can upload, and we can show it later a bit more. You can upload your implementation, so an example message, and it will then also check these business rules, whether in this case either the position ID is filled or the position task ID is filled. So this is the basics of the platform, with the hierarchical structure of the message, but in this case the planning request that we have been developing. Then I want to quickly show you the code list. As said before, this was also in the time of the PDF files. Those were separate files. And also in the platform, it's a bit of a separate thing because it's something that we sometimes want to change more often than we want to change the specification of the standard itself. So that's why it's separate from the specification of the standard itself. So, for example, we can see here when we have last updated some of these code lists, which has been last year. And you can see, for example, I know these standards, of course, a bit, that here we have a code list for the planning message, which are action codes. We won't dive into the details of what this means. But what for a maintainer of a standard is really useful is that all of these code lists are being linked to the message specifications that are used in. So, for example, here you see that both in the planning request, this action code is being used, but also in the planning constraints message, this action code is used. And in a lot of others, and these are also different versions of the standards. That's why there are a lot of repeats also here. So if, for example, someone requests us to add a new action code because these 4 are not enough, then you can also check as a maintainer, like, do I want, what is the impact of this change or this addition to the message? Because maybe someone is only looking at the planning request, and in that context, it's very logical to add a 5th action code. But maybe for the context of the planning constraints, it's not that logical that this value is added. So this helps in checking also the consistency and the integrity of all the standards, that you know what is the impact in this case of adding something to this code list. Then Wouter also already showed a bit about the issues, and now I get actually an error because I'm not logged in. We in this community, we have agreed that the specifications of the standards and the specifications of the code list are open for everyone. So you do not need to be member of the SETU, you do not need to fill in your login details on this platform to be able to see the specifications and the code list. But if you want to put in an issue, this is behind the login. Well, we have different types. And I will log in with my professional email address, and then I will see all the issues that are there. I will, for the moment, only give myself rights as a user, so you see what a user would see. And then in this list of issues, you see which issues are not yet fixed. So you can search if you want to. You can just check which are open. You can here also see like all the issues that have been there, so also the closed issues. You can also see the issues that I, for example, have been putting in, which I do not do a lot, as you see, but I have done it somewhere in 2020. But you can also see, and for my account, this is a bit tricky because TNO actually submits quite a lot. But if you would be a staffing supplier or an IT company, you could see whether colleagues of yours have already submitted, for example, an issue about something that is important to you. So getting back to, for example, this one, then you can again also see, and that's what Wouter already showed, that, let me see for this one now. For this one, you can see that to which element in the standard this is actually referring. And as Wouter already showed, so I will not show that again. You can also, when you look at the specification, see whatever issue or multiple issues might be submitted about this element. So we always know when we're working on the standard, when we're adding stuff or changing stuff, whether there are open issues or open requests for changes to this specific standard and a specific element in a standard. So I think that's all about the issues. One other thing we might be interested to show you is that the working groups, which is a very important vehicle for us to do the discussions about these standards and to further develop these standards, is that we also created a place in this platform for all the working groups to share all the contents. So, for example, looking again at this working group of the planning info, We, as you can see, have actually held 5 meetings with this group. These were sometimes virtual meetings and sometimes they were in our office. You can also find all the slides that we have been sharing with them, the notes that we have been made during this working group, and this is again trying to interlink all the artifacts that are on the platform. You can see which issues we have been discussing. And here in brackets, you can see that with while discussing this, we have also closed the issue. So we've actually processed this issue, for example. So these 3 are being discussed in this working group, and we've come up with a solution which is now being processed into the next version of the standard. And then with that, this issue is also closed and solved. So in this way, we compared to the process that I just described with all the separate artifacts, with all the information flowing all over all the documents that we had. We tried to make this a very integrated solution with the standards as itself as the core where everything around that is being linked to. So an issue here is linked to a working group. An issue is linked to a specific element in the standard. So you can always get from one to another without needing to be present at the specific working group or remembering by heart what we have actually been discussing here. So I think for now, that's what I wanted to show you about the basics. So I will go one step further, and this relates to the comment that was just also shared, and even the picture is in there, and that's not, it was already there before it was put in the chat this morning. If we look at this process of this new standard for planning, then you could ask the question, are we doing the right thing here? Because if we would have started from scratch, this would actually be the case. We have 14 standards, and at the end result, it is that we have a 15th standard. So, and I already elaborated on that a bit, is that we said, okay, if we want to develop the standard for the SETU environment, for the Dutch context, we could have a look at the international HR open standards. To actually build upon an existing standard. And this is a bit the model that we have been reusing, which is quite extensive, in the sense that we said there are a lot of building blocks, like a staffing supplier, as already mentioned, and that this is some kind of organization, and an organization always has a name and an identifier and a location. We do not need to again specify that in the Dutch context, because there's nothing that is very Dutch context specific that we want to have in that. So we can just reuse whatever this HR open standard already defines. And this is actually the process that we have been adhering to when we developed these standards. So we picked this HR open specifications. We had that as an input into the Semantic Treehouse platform. Then there are also some SETU or Dutch context specific things that we wanted to add. And that's all input into what we called the wizard. And I don't think, Wouter, that you have already explained this more elaboratively, right?
No, that's right. That's right. I was planning to, if we have time, to show this process again for the zero waste context.
Okay.
And now that you allowed me to talk, I had a question.
Yes.
Because this is in line with what Mia asked. He asked before, you know, reuse of existing standards is all well and good, but how do you decide which one to use if there are so many? So can you briefly say something about how you and the SETU team decided on the international HR open specification to reuse? Was that an obvious choice?
Yeah, in this case, it was actually quite simple, so to say, because in this domain, there are not that many open standards available. And I already say open standard because, of course, if it's a closed standard adhering to a specific software package or a specific implementation, then it's already not available for us. So we, of course, looked into what other standardizations organizations are there around the world, and there are not that many. So for us, it was quite obvious that this was the more or less only choice that we have if we wanted to reuse.
Right.
So we did not really have this question in this context.
Yeah.
I can imagine that for another context this might be a bit different, but in this case it was not there.
Right. So check if the content is useful, of course. Check if it's open. And I would say, and I would add, check if you have confidence in the maintenance of that standard too, right? Are they making sure it's alive in a year and maintained? And perhaps finally, a fourth, look around and maybe check if you can the degree of adoption in other places of that. You want to, of course, a popular one to reuse. Okay, so Miha, thanks. So back to your story. This picture, I think, is very important with the input and now the demonstration of the process in the middle. Thanks, Philip.
Yeah, so I will be showing you this wizard, and this is an approach that we have been developing to be able to reuse whatever domain model or data model is already out there, which you probably want to make or use in a bit more specific context. And what this wizard does is that it allows you to select elements out of the existing model and use it for your specific, in this case, SETU specific message model. And what this wizard also will do, which is at the right hand of this picture, is that almost with one click, you can generate, for example, an XML or JSON schema implementation of this message specification and also an API specification. So in this sense, we also want to lower the barrier that you can use this wizard without having too much technical knowledge, and that then with one click you can generate these more technical artifacts that can be used in an actual implementation. One slide more about this wizard approach is that we want to, in so to say, design time. We want to so in the process of setting up the standard, we want to import. In this case, we have called it an ontology, but you can also read this as a more common data model that is already out there. This will be the input of the wizard. With the wizard, you will create this message schema. So again, as we have seen, this hierarchical structure of elements that you want to have in your message. And in the runtime, this message can be used from a data provider to a data consumer and enable the actual information exchange. So I will just show this in practice because otherwise it might be a bit abstract. And I will again show the screen. So as I'm now logged in, I will again go to the planning requests, and I will now put on the maintainer rights. And as you see, there will be an additional button. We don't want every user to be able to edit all the specifications that we have, but as a maintainer, I'm allowed to do so. So instead of going to the tree view, I will now click on the edit, and this is I won't change too much because this is actually a message that we're currently developing, but I will show you how it works. So this wizard that I just talked about has a three-step approach, which is first defining on which existing data model you want to build your new message model. So for example, I will go here. I have said, as also was in the picture that I just showed, I want to use this HR open So this international standardization organization ontology. So this is a domain model that they have been defining. I want this to be imported in the in this wizard, together with some SETU specific definitions that we also need. We will not dive into the details of that, but the important thing is that you can reuse one or multiple existing data models as a basis for this for this message that you are defining. And what you also can do here is say, okay, this is a very extensive data model, but for the message that we want to define, there we need one starting point. So which starting point from all these data models that I already have do I want to use as the starting point for this message? And in this case, the HR Open ontology did not have anything yet about planning or planning requests. So we have actually defined our own starting point here, which is the planning request. If you would have had another case, it might have been the case that if you, for example, wanted to generate a new message about all the details about staffing organizations, I can imagine that you could have used a starting point from the HR Open ontology, as we have seen just yet with the party that they have been developing. So you could use that just as the starting point in your message specification. By saying that this is the starting point, the planning request, if we go to the next step of the wizard, it immediately defines that this is the starting element. And I will again dive into this example of the supplier, because we have seen here that the supplier is a sub-element of this message, and that this is of the type HR Open standards. Oh, I'm sorry. And they define something like a party, which you can also read as an organization. And what this wizard does, and that's the interesting thing, I don't know whether you can distinguish the colors, but I can now choose to add all the elements that the HR Open party involves. So HR Open has said, for example, that a party can have a name, which sounds very logical, can also have a code, and it can also have an ID, a legal ID, and a tax ID. And what we have been doing here is we deliberately chose not to reuse the name, so that's why it's still here at the bottom, but we have chosen to reuse the ID, the legal ID, and the tax ID as they have been defining.
Yeah, in fact, Linda, if you go to the, you can show them, right? By clicking on show used properties, you can, at the zandlopertje next to the search, you can see show used properties, and then you'll see that actually these three that Linda has included into her message are indeed also part of the HR Open ontology or the SETU ontology. So that's why they are, but they leave it out. The system leaves it out when you already have picked them.
Yep. Yeah, and as you might not be able to see because it's a bit small, but there's a plus here. I'm not going to click on it right now because this is an actual standard in use, and then I will will break some stuff probably. But if I would click on this plus, I could also add the name. So if we, in the discussion with the working group, have identified that apart from an ID, a legal ID, and a tax ID, it would be beneficial to also have the name in this message specification, I could click on it and it immediately becomes part of the message specification that I'm developing. So in this sense, we always say we can click it together. So you can just with clicking on these pluses, you can create a message model based on all the elements that in this case, the HR Open standard has been already defining for you. You can say this one I want into it, this one I don't want to get into the message specification and this. And at the right-hand side, you could maybe adapt the definition a bit. You can adapt whether you, for example, want the element to be always there. So now it's 0, 1, which means that you could use it, but you're not obliged to use it. And if you use it, you can only use it once. But you could also change this and say, I always want the supplier to be defined. Then I change this 0 into a 1. And then this will be saved as a preference for this message model. And the interesting thing is, once we have done this, we can go to the third phase of the wizard, which is the export. This was also the right hand part of the picture that I showed, that we now with one click, so to say, can generate technical artifacts or technical specifications for this message specification. And we support different syntaxes. So, for example, for those of you who are familiar with XML, you can choose for that syntax to export. We actually, you can choose between different styles of XSDs if you want to, but we won't dive into the details of that today. And what then happens is that based on the specification of all these elements that you have clicked together, the system generates an XML schema for this. So you can now see here that the starting element of this message is the planning request with the definition that we have been providing, and that below this there will be a document ID, and this is how this should be defined in an XSD, so an XML schema. If you would go to JSON, then we need a bit of time, but here you see actually exactly the same information and the same message specification, but then in the JSON format, where it says, okay, at the top, it is actually required to have a document ID, to have a customer defined, and to have a position profile defined. So this is just a different formatting, a different syntax, but it actually is precisely the same message specification as we have been specifying in the step 2 of this wizard. And also examples are being generated with example values that we have been providing. So this is also something that the platform is generating for you. So there's no manual work, manual labor involved in generating then these kinds of technical artifacts.
Yeah, Linda, if I may,
yeah,
by the
sure.
way, I see that we have to be mindful of the time. We have a little less than half an hour left, but I hope that everyone else can appreciate that what Linda has showed you is the equivalent of the last 120 pages, 100 pages of the document that I started with. Remember, in the previous step, making the abstract information model, what is the information that we expect? And then the big chapter 4 that I showed in the PDF with the endless tables of elements. These are all here and generated in the last appendix. The XML example is generated here. So from a maintainer's standpoint, this is an enormous benefit and even enormously more ease of use, as we can contest or attest to from our experience.
I think I can leave it to this, Wouter,
okay.
for demo.
Excellent. Lisa?
Yeah, I wanted to link this with what we saw yesterday, and I was just wondering, so when you were able to download those things yesterday and import and whatever it was that you were all doing, is then this what you can do with that?
Well, yesterday was about making sure Semantic Treehouse works as an app, and then you can forget everything about that, about yesterday, and we can just assume that the work yesterday has done correctly. and then we start from a user perspective. So no, the thing from yesterday is just getting it online.
So is it the thing from yesterday then to be able to do this? To be able
so
to
getting
start
the app running is the
yeah.
topic of yesterday, and then everything we've showed you is on a different level today. This is for the actual usage of the platform.
Yeah, okay.
It's of course a little bit meta, because the usage of the platform is about getting information and technical specifications, but they are completely decoupled.
Yeah, so I think what we have seen here is one of the instances of the Semantic Treehouse platform. This was the instance specifically for the SETU community. So actually behind the scenes, we have done everything that you have seen yesterday to get this instance up and running. And once you have it up and running, you can start with formulating the message specifications. You can start with maybe importing documents that you already have. Or models that you already have, and start doing all the things about the community management, the issues. But of course, then you first need the platform to be online, and that's what you have been seeing yesterday, how you can actually make that happen.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. And in fact, Lisa, your comment is an excellent bridge to the final part I would like to present to you today, because of course, Linda has shown a very mature community and a mature use of Semantic Treehouse in a different sector, and now we need to go back to a more familiar sector. Like Miran asked yesterday, now we need to go back to the Zero Waste project. And so we will. And we will switch then also to a different Semantic Treehouse deployment. And we arrive at the zerowaste.semantictreehouse.nl environment. And Lisa, because we did the steps from yesterday, a year ago or so, we now have this environment as well. And I think we will soon change, by the way, the domain. You'll hear about that later, but we feel that we have a more suitable domain than this. But for now, you can visit here by following along this URL. I'll just put it in the chat. And I would like to show you actually the same process Linda showed, but from a zero waste perspective. So what if we wanted to define some data exchange, but we're worried, like Miha, for example, that we need to use a pre-existing standard for that? Well, let's see how it goes. So first of all, I need to be maintainer at least to create a new specification in the environment. If you want to be a maintainer in this environment as well, just log in one time using the platform of your choice, for example, LinkedIn or GitHub or Google. And for now, you will have to send me an email asking, can I have maintainer rights? Because I'll have to do it manually. In a few weeks or months, I will get an instant notification and I can do that more efficiently. So I am now maintainer as well. And I'm going to the specifications page, and you can see that there is a bunch of vocabularies. We can regard these as pre-existing standards. Like the Demeter AIM or even the Zero Waste ontology designed in a different work package. Then there's the data models. To be honest, it's just one. There's two here, but they are both the same about food fact. This was for demonstration purposes, earlier demonstration purposes. We can ignore them for now. And then we have the playground. If you are a maintainer and you want to try this out, I recommend or even ask you to make new specifications here. Because in the playground, it's clear that it's not for actual use yet. We're just experimenting. And in fact, we have a SIL, I guess it's a double L, right? A SIL 1 playground here where we have already done so with a few use cases. And I can show you that. But actually, I want to do the process Linda showed again to make it clear what it looks like from the start. So let's try to make a specification based on the zero waste ontology, so that Semantic Treehouse will give us guardrails to make sure that what we make reuses the specification of zero waste, right? Or some others, but we've chosen the zero waste ontology now. Let's see. But let's create a new message model. And we can do it in the workshop playground. I made it specifically for now. Put it there, and we'll just call it Wizard tryout. Because this functionality we call the wizard because it's a series of steps, right? And we don't need to fill this one in. We have a model version, that's fine. It's a work in progress, that's fine as well. We're just showing. Now, this is the interesting part. What is the basis of our message? What is the basis of our data model that we're creating here? We can just start from scratch. This is nice for just playing around. But like we said, and like Mia asked as well, we want to start from a existing ontology. Now, ideally, we would be able to get every standard from the net, from the internet, but now we don't have that kind of federation yet. So now we can only start from specifications in this environment, loaded into this environment. And we'll just search for the zero waste one. And I know this one works, so I feel comfortable clicking this one. And then, like Linda said, these ontologies, these are all graphs, right? They are not hierarchy message kind of tree likes. So we need to pick one point in that pre-existing standard that we want to use as starting point. And the use case that we tried on before in SIL1 were actually kind of measurements of food waste. So I'll just say here, well, I need some kind of measurement as a starting point. And Saref is a nice one and is also included in the zero waste ontology, by the way. That's why it's in here. So I'll just put this one here. And I say, well, let's start. Let's create. All right, so we are now in an empty tree. We are starting from scratch. And like I said, the whole purpose of this wizard is that Semantic Treehouse helps you create a data model based on the existing standard. So if I click this, Semantic Treehouse parses the existing standard and it provides you with the options that the standard gives. So as long as you pick from the options here, you know you are compliant and reusing the previous standard. So in my case, I would like, well, I know that I want to specify that what it is a measurement of in my data. And I'll just say, well, it's some kind of food loss, for example. And now it's included in my data model. So I'm getting somewhere. And it might be also a unit of measure. So and in fact, it says I should include it because it needs to be minimal of 1 and maximal of 1 included. So I'll just include a unit of measure. Again, I'm specifying the data model, right? So I'm not specifying the data itself. I'm not saying which unit of measure yet. I know that in my data model, there needs to be an expression about the unit of measure. Later, I can say, well, I will expect, apologies. I expect some constraints and I will allow kilograms or pieces or degrees Celsius here. In fact, to my own surprise, it already specifies this. So apparently that's part of the pre-existing standard we're building on already. Right? Okay, so back to building our tree.
If the measurement doesn't exist, can you add?
Yes, that's a nice, the general question is, if the pre-existing standard is not sufficient, can I add? And technically the answer is yes, but tactically, strategically, what are we doing here? Because if we add new things,
then you're
not interoperable. Yeah. This is the way of life with interoperability. Ideally speaking, Mia, we would try to maintain interoperability while at the same time acknowledge that there is a use case or a requirement not being met yet. So what do? We make it explicit. So we say, actually, I'll just go out of the edit mode and pretend that this one is finished, and I'll create an issue. Missing unit of measure. For my use case, I need, and then blah, blah, blah. It's not, of course, not blah, blah. It's very precise information. And this way, Mia, we can acknowledge the request and requirement. And maybe you say, well, for now, I will go back to the edit message. And for now, I will edit myself. Custom unit of measurement. So you can go along with your use case, but you have flagged that you are deviating, and you can bring it to the community to decide if we need to make a formal extension, or maybe even communicate this to the other standards and say, what do you think? Can we add this to you? That's why the maintenance of the other standard is so important, because nothing is fixed. Everything needs to be able to maintain or change. Does this answer your question, Mia?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah. So I hope I'm making clear that by this wizard function in these colors here, the Semantic Treehouse fosters reuse because it gives guardrails. It says, well, you can, if you want to be compliant to the pre-existing standard and hence be interoperable, you can use these. And if there's even more like this ones, but if you have talking about a measurement, then the models gives you these ones. And if you need something else, because after careful consideration, the pre-existing standard does not provide your option you need for your use case, you can add it. It's your data model, of course. So we could say, well, we would like maybe a reason for
Also, in a previous step, when you chose to import ontologies, you can import 2 or more.
Yes.
Yeah. And for the entry point, you selected measurement. What if none of those are, you have some?
Yeah.
Can you define custom entry point and then add here, or if you understand? Yeah.
We could even say, well, I run the risk of losing half of my audience here, but if you add a custom element, say Mia, that this one is just starting from your own. If you then have this one, you can manually add the target class and say, well, actually, this is a measurement, and the platform will then recognize that, and you can go along again.
Okay. Thanks.
So this is some of the customization that we are designing for, because we find these questions in practice as well. And Semantic Treehouse every time is a representation of our current knowledge of what actual practical obstacles you see when you try to step towards interoperability. So that's why we support that. If it didn't support that, you would be free to make an issue at our repository. Just some very gentle marketing there. So I hope this is clear that if we have a simple use case of wanting to exchange in an interoperable way measurements of food waste, then maybe we would like to have a timestamp as well, because basically we're sharing measurements. And of course, what is a measurement without the value? So add a value as well. And perhaps then we're done. And I see that we have 10 minutes left. Oh, by the way, our comment here is now clear. Do you see that? It's signified that there is a discussion about this part. I wanted to show you one more thing, and that's has to do with, we see here different data models. So sometimes you don't have an organization or a very clear maintenance process or a clear standardization process. Sometimes you just have use cases, and you can just add them here and say, well, I don't know about interoperability, but this is my data model. and let's see how it goes from there. Let's try to align them. And this is kind of a different approach. It kind of turns things around. We don't have this organization. We don't have this coordination. We just have use cases in Semantic Treehouse, and people saying, well, I don't know about you, but we do this way. This is kind of a bottom-up approach. And I wanted to briefly show you what that can look like. Because if you take, take different examples of basically the same thing, basically two data models for food loss measurements, you can start to compare them. So we can say, well, how did the Romanian use case create their model? That's right here. And what about the Slovenian use case? That's a bit different. And now, for many of you, you will start to ask, what are their relationships? And of course, we are also designing for ways to signify the relationship. So if we do timestamp, it has information about this timestamp, but also, wait a minute, this has something to do with this element for the Romanian use data model or for the Slovenian model. It's up to you for now to decide what the relation is exactly, because a timestamp and a year is not quite the same, but they serve the same function. Has value. Here it's called quantity. Of course, someone had to specify this. Someone had to say, I think has value is related to quantity and has value is related to processor food waste. Who knows? Within a year, we might let AI do the guessing. It's an interesting venue of innovation, I think. But this is not free in the sense that it takes work to figure out what the relations are. This is mapping work. And for now, mappings are just like this, comparing models. Later this year, we are planning on creating mapping as separate specifications. So actually mappings being statements, A looks like B. These are mappings. Has value looks like quantity, and we want to maintain those mappings as well because they are very important if to figure out the interoperability. Okay, so we are running out of time. This was the last thing I really needed to show you, also to keep my promise to Miran that I would bring it back to zero waste. I've showed you the process Linda did, but then for a simple zero waste use case and a small comparison functionality. I see that Linda would like to bring in something too. Go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, maybe one comment to position this mapping functionality is that we have seen in several contexts that you sometimes cannot influence a system or an interface, for example, and then it might be very relevant to say like, okay, but this is the message or this is the data model or the message specification that this interface is using. It's static, so we cannot influence it. So the only thing we can do is try to relate it to the model that we know in our use case or the common model that we already have. So that's a bit what we try to support here, that if you have a case in which you cannot influence the model or there's a certain reason why people cannot or will not adopt a common model, then we want to be able and to make it as smooth as possible to relate multiple models to each other.
Yeah, thanks for that addition. A side note, but maybe I need to go to the conclusion here first. There you go. So I guess this was, I guess we skipped this one. I think my screen is sharing now again. Yeah, so we skipped alternative use of semantic trees, although we did show the, we did show a little bit about the bottom-up approach. We will go more into depth maybe tomorrow if we have time. And I did show you a few other things later. Miha?
Yeah, I got another quick question about mappings you just showed.
Yeah.
Are those visible when you export to JSON LD
not
or
yet.
not? These are only for platform.
Yes, but there are open standards for specifying mappings. and we are very looking forward to getting around implementing those mappings as a first-class citizen of Semantic Treehouse, and also being able to export them, because one of our design philosophies is that it needs to be simple to bring your stuff into the platform, but just as simple to bring your stuff out of the platform.
Okay, thanks.
I want to conclude this session with this, based on this. So a couple of points. A lot of what we've shown is in the documentation, or should be. So if it's not, we know the documentation is missing. If you let us know that you are missing something in the documentation, this makes it easier for us to prioritize fixing our documentation. So, but in essence, this should probably be a starting point. Yeah. Again, please consider creating an issue at our GitLab if you have any problems or issues or feature requests. We want to collaborate with you. We want to stay in touch. Thirdly, maybe the last one first. If you want to try out what I just did on the zero waste environment, you need to have maintainer rights. In the near future, we will have a refactor of the platform, and we'll have more easy and powerful fine-grained access control. But for now, you need to get the maintainer user rights, and the only way to get them is to get them from an admin like me. So if you want to, just log in once and then send me an email that you would like these rights. Finally, the next session, as we are moving through our three-part workshop, we've started from the technical down, the deployment of Semantic Treehouse. We went a little bit up, so to speak, and showed you around on the platform. And tomorrow we will zoom out a little bit more and talk more about the B.O.M.O.S strategy and tactics. So more about how to organize for interoperability. We'll also mention what the link is with data spaces. And I remember a question yesterday, someone asking, I think one of these UM students, I think it was Mohammed, that said, we're interested in a connection with data space connectors. We can briefly touch that. But also from a strategic point of view, there's a link with data spaces, because Semantic Treehouse is a vocabulary hub, which is a component in the data space framework. And we would like to share with you the roadmap of Semantic Treehouse development, so the development of the platform itself. In fact, we will look back a little bit on how the development went and how our communities that we are in touch with influenced our roadmap and the way the Semantic Treehouse has gotten form, and what we are building now, and what we're building in the future, and how you can be part of that. So these are the three main topics for tomorrow. And with that, my part here is done as well.